This is the ATL Fan Podcast, and on today's show, we have a loaded baked potato for you. Yes, we have a loaded show for you. First up, we have Don Montgomery Green talking about the conclusion to the Urban Meyer saga that happened in Ohio State this past summer. Then we have our college football writer, David Berger, with part 2 on Berger's bold predictions for college football in 2018. So I know you're not going to miss that because it is Football Friday here on the ATL Fan Podcast. This is the ATL Fan Podcast. We are with fansfavoritefan.com. Right now, I just want to tell you guys about a little secret, especially if you are a small business owner or you're a CEO of a company that's about to be a Fortune 500 company, or you're one of those people that just works from home or remote because your company is somewhere out there and it's not in the Atlanta area. Well, I want to let you know about Spaces Midtown East, and Spaces Midtown East has a friendly staff. They are very open and welcome to the type of business that you are running. And just to tell you more about it, we have the regional manager here from Spaces Midtown East, Steve Choi.
Oh, thank you, Alex, and thanks for getting that secret out there. And absolutely not many people know, but I think they're starting to learn more and more about what we do. We here at Spaces Midtown, we provide both collaborative space as well as private space for all types of professionals, whether that be individuals like yourself or small companies and even large companies. And so I really do appreciate you giving us a chance to get a shout out there. And I absolutely enjoy having you and Fans Favorite Fan come out. So if anybody out there wants to come take a look at what Spaces Midtown East is about, let us know that Alex sent you. We'll offer you a 5-day test drive. Go to www.spacesworks.com and come on in and set up a time, and we'll have you come in and take a test drive for free.
Thank you, Steve, for those kind words and that information, because I definitely couldn't remember that off the top of my head. So I definitely appreciate that. It is a block north from the Fox Theater, and if you've lived in this city for about a year, you know where the Fox Theater is. So just check them out. They're right on Peachtree Street, and I'm going to put the link to their website in our show description. So be sure to check out Spaces Midtown, and they'll definitely hook you up. It is finally going to happen, and I'm kind of excited about it. I'm a little bit excited, and I think this is a little bit overrated at the same time, but it's finally going to happen. Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods are going to be playing each other in golf, not just in a tournament or anything like that, not just paired up, being partners for some sort of tournament like the Masters or the U.S. Open. They're actually going to play each other, and it's actually going to be the Friday of Thanksgiving. And Phil Mickelson said there's really nothing going on that time in golf, but there is a lot going on in football at that time, and it is a pay-per-view. So it makes me wonder that Friday, when rivalry weekend, try to say that 5 times fast, rivalry weekend is going to be in full force at that time, because a lot of those big games start on Friday, or those games that are kind of interesting, like and UNC, North Carolina. Those games, that's kind of an interesting game. You have games like that, but it makes me wonder, really makes me wonder, because I have a strong feeling about this, because I would really like to see either someone like Clemson, South Carolina, or the Iron Bowl be played on that Friday. Because that would honestly take away from Phil and Tiger. That would probably stop you from paying that ridiculous pay-per-view fee that's going to be. And yeah, I think it would be cool to see the Iron Bowl on a Friday because that would be must-see TV at that time because during rivalry week, you're only interested in your team. And then you kind of lose track of everything else. Because I know a while back, Georgia Tech was always at that 3:30 slot. Well, CBS had the 3:30 slot for the Iron Bowl, and that kind of lost my attention because my team was playing at 3:30. Just some food for thought. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would like to see that happen. But we have a loaded Football Friday for you. We have Don Montgomery Green and we have David Berger on. So we're just gonna have to get right into it. I know we're already 2 minutes in, and this is going to be a long podcast. Appreciate if you listen to the whole thing, but if you don't really want to listen to the whole thing, totally understand. First up, we're gonna have Don Montgomery Green. So you can skip ahead to that, or if you want to hear David Berger, you can skip ahead to that as well. But the order is going to be Dawn, David, and then we close out the show because David's going to be the bulk of this podcast. So, but hopefully, I hope you enjoy today's podcast. This is Football Friday. I'm Alex Berger, and we are with Fans Favorite Fan. .com. If you're a real sports fan, you need to check out Fans Favorite Fan. Even if it is for the sports ticker, score ticker, which we have a wonderful score ticker on fansfavoritefan.com. But be sure to check that out. We got a lot of interesting articles. We have had wall-to-wall coverage of the Corky Kell Classic. But thank you for tuning into us today. We really appreciate it. I'm glad that you're on board with the ATL Fan Podcast. And now, here is my conversation with Don Montgomery Green. As you are all aware, late Wednesday night, we all got the news that Urban Meyer is going to be back at Ohio State. And we found out that the Board of Trustees thought with their knowledge, they thought that he should only be suspended for 3 games instead of losing his job. I kind of had a feeling this was coming a little bit when you're getting a lot of Ohio people and trying to figure out a way to save Urban Meyer's job. Also, too, the athletic director has been suspended as well. So there's a lot of skeletons in those closets there at Ohio State. And to talk more about this subject, I thought we'd bring back Dawn, since she is an Ohio State fan, to give her opinion on the subject. So, Dawn?
Well, I'm temporarily observing and trying to figure out if my fandom is worth money over morals at this point. Their decision to give him a slap on the wrist and tell him that he's not going to be able to coach for 3 cupcake football games is not a punishment. The biggest thing that the Board of Trustees did is that I felt like yesterday when they literally took all that time with him there, I don't even think they were really talking about that investigation. I think they were preparing him for his horrible press conference. And he still did horrible because in his press conference, he found a way to erase the victim, which was Courtney Smith here. And to me, that in itself, not just the suspension, it was just you don't even have a heart to really apologize to this young woman in the situation that she's been put in. Your apology to her and to the fans and to everyone else involved at Ohio State was, I'm sorry we're in this situation. Who is we? And that was something that I posed on social media last night. And I was in tears after I watched the press release twice, and it made me cry. I called my mom. And she was all, well, I'm still going to be a fan because she's been a fan of Ohio State longer than me. She's lasted through other scandals. But for me, it just, because I'm a millennial and we see more student athletes being held accountable for worse. Like Ty Gurley he had a 4-game suspension. You know, AJ Green had a 4-year suspension. You got the players from North Carolina who sold their shoes to get money, had a bigger suspension than Urban Meyer. And here it is, you want me to think that based on good faith and good belief in him not remembering certain things and dealing with his protege, Coach Zach Smith, that he made the best decision and not reporting to his higher up, which was AD Gene Smith. No, I don't believe that, especially not when your wife knows. And then your wife was getting rid of text messages and things like that. So I don't know, Alex. I feel like, you know, we talked about this since season 1 of this podcast, and I'm thankful that we still have dedicated and loyal listeners. But I've told you guys from day one, I will always hold my team accountable. My fandom isn't worth it, you know, to just say, I just want to win. Yes, he's a winning coach, but this man has had problems. Coach Zach Smith has had problems since 2009, since he worked with Urban at the University of Florida. And we all know what former player used to play for him over there and what that situation turned out to be like when him and Shelly tried to counsel him in his issues, Aaron Hernandez, you know. So it's like, at this point, is Ohio State necessarily putting money over morals? And I don't mean the money in winning. I think it's more in the buyout. I think they were going to lose more money in trying to buy him out of his contract, and then also knowing that another university was going to pick him up easily if they had fired him. So it's just so many different things, so many different layers to that. But I don't agree with it. I'm still not a Urban Meyer fan. Y'all have known this since I've been talking about Ohio State, but it's just the facts are there. And I think Brett McMurphy has done a wonderful job in his reporting of everything that he's been sharing. And this all started now, let's be real, because Urban Meyer called out Brett McMurphy for his tweet about all of this. And if he hadn't have done that, we would not be in this position right now.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things that it's like, oh, you want to call me out on this?
Exactly.
I'm going to go dig for it.
Mm-hmm. And he had receipts. He had receipts of everything.
And the article that ESPN released last Friday about Zach Smith and all the stuff he's done since he's been at Ohio State, like that should have been more of a red flag. And you should have considered things, but no, you had a bunch of Ohio people on this board or whatever that you formed, and you found a way to save your guy.
And then my biggest thing is you know, in student athlete suspensions and stuff like that at universities, right? Like the university isn't the one that's doing the investigation, right? It's the NC2A, correct? So why is it that Ohio State can do their own investigation and then hand out their own suspension?
Because
in this situation?
it's their employee, which these players aren't employees of the university. They're just players.
Right.
So. But
in that, it's almost like the NC2A still needs to step in to do something. You know what I'm saying? They're a governing body, so they're a system where whatever the Ohio State decision is, I feel like if the NC2A disagree with it, they could come in and overrule them. Almost like the Supreme Court. You know what I'm saying? Like, because as far as I'm concerned, that's just this was a BS suspension. It was nothing. And then all Gene Smith is going to miss out is on pay for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, they play Oregon State, Rutgers, and TCU is ranked 16th in the country right now.
They can afford to lose those 3 games. They really can. And think about it. We talked about this last season, Alex. They tend to lose either that first game that they play or it's the second or third game.
It's if they're playing someone in the top 25 or the top 10, they usually lose that game when they play that on the second week. So it's a given
they could easily be 1-3 or a 1-2 or 2-1 or 0-3. But my thing is will this decision in this situation actually affect them being in the playoff by the end of the season? Will that be taken into consideration?
I think let's go run with the scenario. They lose those 3 games. The first game that Urban Meyer comes back with, they play Tulane, and then they have the Big Ten schedule. So it's pretty much, if you lose those 3 games, you have to win the Big Ten,
right,
to win out to get a playoff bid.
Right. And then it's what will the committee do? Because at the end of the day, it's the committee's decision. Like, will they decide that they're going to be like, yeah, no, Ohio State doesn't get in?
But I'm really curious because Sean McAvoy that we had on the show, he talked because I ran the scenario through him too, and he said that it's like Urban Meyer's given a lot to the assistant coaches and the assistants, so I think Ohio State's going to be okay. And should be in the playoff contention. But I'm curious to see in these next 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks, how much control have they given this guy, and how less control, or is this thing a distraction?
Yeah, I understand that. My one of the things that I saw in the suspension was Urban can be there for practices, and I was like, wait, what? Why would he be there for practices if he's suspended to coach for the game? Like, this is, like, for instance, if what Sean is saying is 100% correct, right? He should have enough faith in his staff to let them run for 3 weeks his team while he's at home. You know, it's that simple. And as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people do know that Urban is really, really good at recruiting, as well as putting some people around him that are excellent at their jobs. That's why he's a winning coach. Like, look at his staff. But then that goes back to his decision making off of the field. At what cost are you willing to make sure that you're a winning coach?
Right. Well, thank you, Dawn, for joining us in interesting times at Ohio State, to say the least. Where can we find you on social media?
At Fans Favorite Fan, because I don't need y'all following me personally. No, I'm just kidding. No, it'll be at Break of DMG. And you guys know I'm on Facebook, because a lot of y'all tend to send me messages via Facebook versus Twitter.
Right.
Well, I'm really accessible, but okay.
Right. Well, we're going to have you back on the show sometime in the near future.
Because the season gets started.
Yeah, to talk about.
I have to bring on my.
Well, just to talk about what's going on at Fans Favorite Fan.
Yeah, that too. And then I have to bring back my, what is it, top 5? So we'll see about that.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. I'm glad throughout this whole thing that we've gotten Dawn's opinion on the subject, because she holds more water than me, David E. Toro, because we're not Ohio State fans, but she is. She's has some attachment to that program, so definitely appreciate her coming on, sharing her piece. Random note. A lot of preseason games this week, and a lot of the preseason games are played on Thursday, like they usually are. The Falcons are played on Saturday, but you need to check out Baker Mayfield's post-game press conference, because he used to be this Oklahoma-looking guy. Like, okay, yeah, he plays for the University of Oklahoma. Yeah, I can see that. He has that that cowboy look to him, you can kind of say. And he now has gone from this Western grungy-looking thing of him to he looks Amish. Like, he has an Amish beard. He's gone Amish once he got to the NFL. I think if he grows it out even more, it's going to look caveman-ish. So check that out. Definitely isn't really the best look for him. I don't really want to throw too much shade at someone's way. I want to take the high road with that, but check out Baker Mayfield's beard. This is, now we're going to transition over, because next we have David Berger, and David gives a lot of information and gives a real interesting perspective on how he thinks college football is going to shake up this year. We're going to take what he says, put it in the vault, and then at the end of the season, we'll re-release it to see how right or how wrong he is, but I would take what David Berger says. I would take it to the sports book in Vegas, because if he's wrong, then he's usually not extremely wrong like some of the other people are. Like, he'll either be close. So I know I definitely enjoy having David on. So here is my conversation with David Berger. Now we just want to welcome back to the ATL Fan Podcast. If you listen to the podcast on Football Friday from last week, we had David Berger on, our college football writer, and we got into his Berger's bold predictions for college football in 2018. And we're just following up with that because it was a lot of just material that we were covering, and we didn't get to all of it. But now we're gonna finish up this conversation. This is part 2 of that conversation. I'll put the link to David's article in the show description for more reference to what we were talking about in the first podcast. Also, you can listen to the first podcast. It's Will Georgia repeat as SEC champions? So, David, how are you doing
pretty
today,
good,
man?
Got a lot going on at work, but overall pretty good. Kind of battling through a little bit of a sinus cold, I think, but other than that, not too bad. Just ready for football.
There you go. I think we're all probably in that boat, minus the sinus condition, but all got a lot going on, and we're all ready for football.
Heck yeah, man. Let's get it going.
Right. Let me ask you about this weekend, because this is kind of like the silent kickoff to college football. I want to say that there are teams that are going to be playing, but it seems like the most intriguing matchup is Hawaii with Colorado State. So Mike Bobo always seems to have his team playing before anyone else's, and I just want to get your opinion. Are there any games that stand out to you besides that one?
Well, a lot of people call this, I guess, week 0 or 0 week because, everybody kicks off next week. But there's 2 games that stand out to me other than Hawaii and Colorado State. The first one is Umass and Duquesne, and Duquesne being an FCS school, Umass making the jump just a couple years ago. It'll be interesting to see how Umass does this year, just in opening, to see if they, have built off of any of their small successes from last year. I mean, they hung with Tennessee for a while last year. So it'll be interesting to me to see how UMass does. And especially, I always admit to people I am a Georgia fan, yes. So Georgia plays UMass later in the season. Just kind of be interested to see what they do. Another one that stands out to me is New Mexico State and Wyoming. This is New Mexico State's first nationally televised game in about 3 decades. In about 30 years.
Wow.
And tickets are still going for only like $3 to $5 a piece. So it'll be interesting to see if it's a sold-out game, again, nationally televised against Wyoming. And Wyoming doesn't have Josh Allen there anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how their offense changes a bit, if it does. If it, the same style still in place with, a tall pocket passing quarterback. But, I mean, granted, not a lot of intrigue, especially for East Coast fans. This is more kind of like a West Coast weekend, especially with Hawaii, Colorado State, New Mexico State, Wyoming playing. And if you don't really have any skin in the game with UMass or Duquesne, then, you're kind of out of luck on that. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be looking for this weekend. A lot of these games kick off later in the afternoon, late at night, especially those West Coast games and especially that Hawaii game. But overall, to me, football is back. Last year, I found myself watching BYU and Portland State on this weekend a year ago. So, it's football, it's college football. I'll take it.
Was that entertaining? Game?
It was for about 10 minutes when you thought Portland State could do it, pull that upset, and then they just totally, utter dismantled internally on themselves. And it was one of those, oh my gosh, they could. Okay, no, they're not. It's Portland State. So it is what it is.
Right. Do you have any interest at all taking it back to the state of Georgia with KSU and GSU?
And it's funny, I am a Kennesaw alumni. As an alumni at Kennesaw State, I mean, they made a great run in the playoff last year for FCS. This, I think, is a bigger game than most people are giving it credit. Kennesaw has a good chance to pull this upset because they do run the triple option. Bohannon, their coach, he came from Georgia Tech. He was a quarterback's coach with Paul Johnson at Tech for a couple years. And so, Kennesaw runs that triple option just like Georgia Tech does. It's the same style of triple option. It's the same, methodology, systematics, and everything. So it'll be interesting for Georgia State just because I don't think they've ever played a team with the triple option. They may have played Navy, but I can't really think back to recent memory if they have. I don't think they have. So Kennesaw has a good chance to play it. If you're familiar with Atlanta's geography, Kennesaw is literally 30, depending on traffic, 30 or 45 minutes north of Georgia State, north of Atlanta on I-75. So this technically is kind of, it will be at Georgia State, but it's technically almost a neutral game in terms of there should be, a ton of Kennesaw people there, a ton of Georgia State people there. So I really could, honestly, and I hate to say this as an alumni, I kind of could care less about it. But I will say of any time for Kennesaw State to get a win against an FBS school, this is it. And with how well they did last year, they kind of shocked a lot of people. They could probably shock a lot of people week one if they can get an upset win against the Panthers.
Yeah, there's also going to be a lot of blue seats there too at Georgia State Stadium. But I don't think that game's going to get filled up because it's pretty much impossible to sell that thing out. When Georgia State, if Georgia State ever does that, I'll be impressed. I'll put it that way. But I just want to switch gears right now and get back to your article. With your New Year's Six predictions, I think it's interesting that you have in the Chick-fil-A Bowl here in Atlanta, Miami and South Carolina. Why'd you come up with that matchup?
For a couple reasons. I think, again, I predicted Georgia to win the SEC, so that would mean Georgia would have to win the East in order to do that. And I think going through that, I think Georgia will beat South Carolina in week 2. I think it'll be a good game. Especially a good early SEC game. But I think South Carolina, outside of that Georgia game, is pretty much set to have a lot of wins this season. Almost about 11 wins. I think they can get. I think they're going to get 10. I think they can run the table, get at least 9 or 10. I have them losing right now to only Georgia and Clemson this year, just because those are the two biggest teams they play. In all their other games, I think they should be favored, and I think they have all the ability to win, barring a huge injury to somebody like Deebo Samuel like last year, or to, Jake Bentley, their quarterback. So I picked, kind of South Carolina as that dark horse. That's that team that will fly under the radar because, Georgia should get a lot of attention this year, being that best team in the East. But at the same time, I think South Carolina will make a great stand as that second best team. I think they'll beat Florida. I think they'll, beat Vanderbilt, beat Kentucky, beat Tennessee. They should run the table in the East outside of Georgia. And South Carolina's poised to do a lot of good things. And I think this is kind of the year where, Will Muschamp takes that team to the next level and puts them in a New Year's Six Bowl. Now, Miami's kind of in the same boat, just on the ACC side. I think they may have trouble up at Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. They may have some trouble with, they don't play Clemson, but they may have some trouble with Florida State. You never know. So I think Miami's going to roll out of the season with 1 or 2, or with only about 2, maybe 3 losses at the most, I think. Miami's got a good quarterback, Malik Rozier, in his senior year. Mark Richt has done a very good job down in Coral Gables. So I think Miami's loaded to be that kind of team that kind of put on the back burner because Clemson will garner so much attention this year. And South Carolina's that team that's on the SEC back burner because Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn are going to garner so much attention. And I think those are those teams that, come late November and December, a lot of fans will say, "Oh yeah, that's right, South Carolina. They're 10-2 or 9-3. Miami 10-2, 9-3." Like, yeah, and they're both geographically close. So Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl it
is. So you also have Boise State and Texas in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. That's kind of weird saying PlayStation with the Fiesta Bowl, but those are both teams right now that not a lot of people are talking about when it comes to big picture college football, predicting New Year's
Yeah, I
6.
think Tom Herman can do a lot in year 2. I think he has a great potential to take Texas to another level that they really haven't been in almost a decade, honestly. So I think Tom Herman has the tools this year. He's got the talent across the ball on both sides of the ball. And again, Boise State being that one team out of the group of 5 that can really get it done as well. Boise State's going to be competing nationally with UCF and Memphis, most likely, for that group of 5 bid. But I think this year it's going to go to Boise, and they love putting Boise in the Fiesta Bowl. Boise travels very well to that bowl. Got a lot of fans coming down from Idaho to Arizona. And I think Texas, coming out of the Big 12, I don't think they win the Big 12. All right? I think Oklahoma wins the Big 12. But at the same time, I think Texas has a very good season, the best they've had in years, best they've had since the days of Colt McCoy. But I still see them getting kind of that, coming up second place in the Big 12, but getting that New Year's 6 bowl, and I see them playing for, the Fiesta Bowl. When we get to the when I mentioned in my article about Oklahoma winning the Big 12, I guess we'll get to that in a minute about where they go. But I do have Oklahoma in the New Year's 6. I don't have the Big 12 in the college football playoff, but I do have Texas in the Fiesta Bowl. And again, Tom Herman, he's got a lot of tools. He's proven to be a very good coach, so I think he gets it done. And then I think they meet up with Boise State, and Boise State being in familiar territory with being in the Fiesta.
Do you think Texas is going to have a shot to beat Oklahoma during the Red River rivalry?
Well, yeah.
Do you think that Oklahoma is just going to beat Texas?
I think it'll be a great game. I think it'll be one of the better games in the rivalry. Texas is not necessarily the veteran team, but at quarterback they're the veteran team. And, I mean, Kyler Murray's a great quarterback, and he's got experience. But in this rivalry, he doesn't because of Baker Mayfield the past 2 years and because Kyler Murray transferred from A&M. So with that said, I think that that this year is Texas's best chance to really jump on Oklahoma. I mean, a couple of years ago, Charlie Strong beat Oklahoma, but that was kind of a weaker Oklahoma team. So I'll say this. I think Texas really has the chance this year to do a lot of damage to Oklahoma. I think it'll be a good game because I mentioned in the last podcast, Oklahoma's speed across the ball is almost unmatched in college football this year. So I will take Oklahoma to win that game. I'll have to see, barring injuries, as of right now, I look at Oklahoma winning that game. But this game, that's going to be close. I think it's going to come down to a field goal, maybe even less. So the Big 12 could come down literally to just a couple points this year.
Wow. Now, nothing's come out today about the Urban Meyer situation, but do you feel this highly about Ohio State that they're going to play Washington in Pasadena for the
definitely.
Rose Bowl?
I see the Ohio State situation as, it's all internal. It has nothing to do with the players. It has nothing to do with the team, the current team. This is all coaching staff and internal personnel. And this is a situation where you've seen teams in the past that rally around stuff like this, that they rally around, their head coach or their team or whatever. And I think Ohio State just has too good a personnel to let this season go to waste. Years ago, before Urban Meyer came there, when they let Jim Tressel go, and they brought in Luke Fickell to be the head coach for that 1 year, and it was just an abysmal year. Ohio State really didn't have the pieces in place that year anyway. Like Ohio State's season, if Jim Tressel was there, they were probably going to lose 3 to 4 games anyway. But, the transition happened so quick with Luke Fickell and all that I think that caused a little bit more, not tension, but a little bit more dissension amongst the program. Come in Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer changes all that, changes the standard, basically brings Ohio State back to where they were when Jim Tressel first started at Ohio State. And, now they're contending almost every year for a national championship, let alone a Big Ten title. I don't think that this derails Ohio State's plans. I think Ohio State stays focused. I think they stay consistent this year. And I think they will, because I have Wisconsin in the in the playoff. I put Ohio State in the New Year's 6 representing the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl. against Washington. Another great team. I think at some point they're going to fall up short. It may be week 1 against Auburn. It may be against Stanford. It may be against Oregon. But nonetheless, I just don't see Washington making the playoff. If they do make it, I see them as a 4 seed. But right now, I got an SEC team as my 4 seed, Georgia or Alabama. I think it's going to come down to that coin toss of who wins the SEC championship. So I got Washington kind of being that first guy out. I got Washington basically at my 5th spot. So put them in the next best game for them as a Pac-12 member. They're going to go to the Rose Bowl to meet Ohio State, which in all honesty would be a terrific game. If you look at it on paper right now, that'd be an outstanding Rose Bowl matchup. I mean, it'd almost be probably just as good, if not better, than last year's Georgia-Oklahoma Rose Bowl. So that's what I got Ohio State. I don't think anything derails their season. I think they stay focused, and I think they get some big wins this year, make it enough to go to the Rose Bowl. And I think Washington, not necessarily with the scandal, but kind of the same thing. They have a good enough team to stay focused. They're not going to let little things derail them. They may have a loss in 1 or 2 close games, but overall they should still win the Pac-12. And I think, their biggest test in the Pac-12 is going to be Oregon and Stanford, and then the Pac-12 championship game. And then they also have the non-conference game, Auburn, for week 1. That's going to be huge in terms of national standings and looking at the national picture. But in terms of the Pac-12, I think Washington's pretty much set focused and pretty much, well stocked with talent to win that thing outright and go to the Rose Bowl.
Now, if they win a couple weeks from now against Auburn, do you feel like that's going to make their season? Like, no matter if they lose to a Stanford or maybe they get upset by USC, do you think that still will help project them into New Year's Six Bowl?
That game is so big for both teams, but for Washington especially. If they can beat an SEC team, the defending SEC West champions, if they can beat Auburn in Atlanta, about 2,500 miles away from home, oh, yeah, that's going to be huge for them looking forward. If they beat Auburn, we may be looking at a team that if they can run the table in the Pac-12, that would have a very good shot at making the the playoff. Because if they beat Auburn and if they only lose 1 conference game, there's no reason why they shouldn't be in the playoff at that point. Just depend on how the other teams at the end of the season ended up with their records and their conference championship games. But, yeah, if Washington beats Auburn, I mean, it's one of those all bets are off kind of deals for everybody else. It's kind of now it's Washington's to lose, so to say. So if they can beat Auburn, oh, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride, I'll tell you that. Now, if Auburn beats Washington,
right,
I think a lot of people are kind of almost expecting that to happen. Auburn to beat Washington. And it's kind of one of those, yeah, I know they have the Mercedes-Benz Stadium curse, but think about it. They've been hearing all summer how they can't play in the Benz, how they lost to UCF, how they lost to Georgia. They've been hearing this whole season of, you guys beat Alabama, cool, but you didn't beat Georgia, you didn't win the SEC championship, and you didn't win the Peach Bowl, and you can't win in Mercedes-Benz. So that's all they've been hearing all offseason. So Auburn's kind of fueled by just showing everybody what they can really do. Washington's fueled mostly by showing everybody what they will be able to do.
Now, you feel like Notre Dame's going to have a pretty good year this year, and obviously you talked a lot about Oklahoma in the last podcast, so just tell us about Notre Dame and why you think that they're going to eventually end up in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, Notre Dame, a lot of people give them a lot of, grief over the years for having an easy schedule. Past couple of years, I'd say in the past 5 years, they've had pretty tough schedules every year. This year, their schedule isn't that bad. In all honesty, it's pretty favorable for them. They get Florida State at home. That's one big game, that kind of is off their slate. They don't have to play USC until the end of the year, so they get all year to get ready for that, and they have to play at USC, but they don't have Sam Darnold, so USC isn't as hard looking out. Overall, Notre Dame does have a lot of good weapons in place. They got a lot of guys returning. They got a good quarterback, Wimbush, coming back. They got a good running game going. They lost a couple offensive linemen, but Notre Dame has had a tradition of having just big guys, so they can fill those holes with, big talent that's, around, 6'5", 6'6", guys weighing, 265 to 300 pounds even. So Notre Dame, I think, is pretty built, and their schedule helps them that they can, if they can get rolling this year, they can be pretty good. Now, there are going to be a couple of tough games for them. They may lose at USC late in the year. I don't think they will, but at the same time, again, we don't know injuries going into all this stuff, but, just in thinking about it, I was like, Notre Dame could be a team that sneaks up on a lot of people. And in all honesty, Alex, that's going to be a very good Sugar Bowl matchup with them playing Oklahoma, who I have winning the the Big 12. So if Oklahoma, can win out the Big 12, that Sugar Bowl matchup of Oklahoma-Notre Dame will be a very, very good matchup. Two huge, historic, storied programs going at it down in New Orleans. A little far away from home, a little bit closer for Oklahoma than Notre Dame, but still, both teams travel really well. It'll be interesting, and I'm just personally, just as a college football fan, like to see Notre Dame back in the Sugar Bowl again. So that's why I got them in the Sugar Bowl, and I think as an at-large bid, because I predicted 2 SEC teams in the college football playoff, that's why I got Notre Dame as kind of an at-large bid and Oklahoma as the conference champion bid going to New Orleans, where they have been familiar with Oklahoma beating Alabama a couple years back in the Sugar Bowl. So not unfamiliar territory for the Sooners, and for the Irish, it'll be a good time being back down in New Orleans for them at the end of the year.
Right. Now I want to get into your Heisman finalists, and you have Bryce Love from Stanford at the top of your list, Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, Trace Mcsorely from Penn State, Will Grier from West Virginia, and you also have Khalil Tate from Arizona. Why, in your opinion, why do you think everyone's so high?
Well,
on
Bryce Love had a sensational season last year. I mean, he finished second in Heisman voting. So he's just a very overall solid back. I mean, he's fast, he's big, he's not huge. He's about medium size. He's not too small, not too big. He's right, perfect size, strong, powerful back, can run fast. He's got all the ability to lead Stanford to many great things this year. I put, 3 quarterbacks in there because, about almost 9 times out of 10, your Heisman winner is going to be a quarterback. But this year it's a little bit different, all right, in my opinion. The quarterbacks, though, are pretty solid. Khalil Tate plays in a system that allows him at Arizona to run around and throw it all over the place, and he amassed a ton of yards. He was honestly, I think, the best, most productive quarterback in college football for the month of October. And so he kind of got a lot of late Heisman recognition, just a little bit of buzz going out there. And then in November, things kind of fell apart for Arizona, so they kind of just stopped talking about it. But Khalil Tate's a solid player. Will Grier is, I think at this point, a 13th year senior or a 12th year senior or something at West Virginia now. And I mean, he's been there for forever. Great system for passing. And he had a very stellar year last year. And again, kind of like Khalil Tate towards the end of the season, people are like, okay, yeah, I could, not this season, but I could see him winning the Heisman next season. A little bit of that talk. And so Will Grier, he's a pretty solid guy for West Virginia. And I mean, he can really sling it around in the Big 12, and just the air raid offense that Dana Holgorsen runs up at West Virginia just allows Will Grier, and he kind of has let Will Grier, kind of taking the brakes off and just let him do his thing. And, his thing is, throwing it for, almost 350 a game. And then my other quarterback, Trace Mcsorely. Trace Mcsorely is one of the best, in my opinion, smartest dual threat quarterbacks in college football this year. He can run, he can pass. I mean, he's pretty smart working with James Franklin and his system up at Happy Valley. So that's my 3 quarterbacks that I got. And then my final running back that I have outside of Bryce Love is Jonathan Taylor. And other than Bryce Love, Jonathan Taylor had one of the best years at running back last year. Georgia fans want to swear up and down about Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, and yeah, they had great years. But at the same time, Jonathan Taylor, as just one back, was better. He was better than these guys. Granted, you got teams that were splitting reps, but at the same time, Jonathan Taylor got most of the workload as a true freshman at Wisconsin in the Big Ten, in a tough, really grinded-out offense that is run-based up in Madison. So this year, I think my Heisman prediction, I'm going with Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to take him. He's going to be, in my opinion, he'll be the third guy at Wisconsin to win the Heisman. And I just see him leading his team and being a focal point of that offense, because with Alex Hornibrook back at quarterback for the Badgers, I see a lot of good things coming from Wisconsin's offense this year. And they had a great offense. They went to the Orange Bowl last year. They went undefeated through the regular season. Their only losses in the Big Ten title game to Ohio State. And that was a very close game up until about the fourth quarter. And Ohio State slowly kind of pulled away. But overall, Jonathan Taylor was a major focal point of that offense. Alex Hornibrook's a good quarterback, but passing isn't Wisconsin's thing. Up in Madison, they're really, use the run to set up the pass. And so I think this year they're going to use Jonathan Taylor to set up a lot of big things in that offense and a lot of wins on the football field. And, don't be surprised if Wisconsin goes undefeated through the regular season again. Their schedule's tougher, but I think with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, a lot of good things can happen for the Badgers. And, this guy amassed over 1,500 yards by himself as a true freshman in the Big Ten. If that doesn't say anything to you, then by all means. Now, Lord willing, I honestly think Heisman voting, I would not be surprised if Bryce Love won it, but I just think Jonathan Taylor this year, I think this is his year. He's going to stand out. I think he's just going to stand out more. And, if they work him into the passing game, along with the running game, this man could be putting up almost 2,000 net yards, in my opinion. So that's why I got Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, running back, winning the Heisman.
Would you take that pick that you just picked? Would you take it to the Vegas sports book?
Well, when I was at Caesar's Palace this past summer, I kind of considered it. But if I had to put money on a guy, I'd put money on Jonathan Taylor. And if I had to put money on another guy, I'd put money on Bryce Love. Those are the two guys I'm putting money on. Now, if you want a quarterback to put money on, I'd put it on Will Grier, in all honesty, because that man, that's going to be the guy that has the most passing yards. So in terms of yards, Will Grier is going to be your quarterback. But in terms of just overall, winning the Heisman, to me, it's Jonathan Taylor number one, Bryce Love number two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, with your playoff predictions, and this year, I think we can all thank God that it's on December 29th, which is a Saturday, by the way, so it's not on New Year's Eve anymore, or New Year's Day. But you have some interesting picks. You have favorites in Alabama, and you have them playing Clemson again for the renewal of that playoff rivalry. Or, I guess you could call it a playoff rivalry. Then you have Wisconsin and Georgia playing in Arlington, and you have Alabama and Clemson playing in Coral Gables.
Yeah, I got it, just part four of the matchup. And I think, overall, Alabama's just Alabama. I've said it many, many times. They don't rebuild, they reload. Clemson's going to be absolutely loaded, especially on defense. So I got those two guys going in there. And then I got Georgia. I had Georgia winning the SEC, so I have Alabama with its only loss being to Georgia. I have Alabama at the 4 seed playing Clemson. I think they go undefeated throughout the whole season, win the ACC again. So I have them again at the 1 seed. So Alabama and Clemson, 1 versus 4 again, this time down in Miami. At the Orange Bowl. And then you have Georgia and Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin pulls out the big win in the Big Ten title game against Ohio State. They get revenge from last year. And so I have Georgia at 2, Wisconsin at 3, Alabama at 4. And I think Georgia's going to meet up with Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl. The number 1 overall team number 1 overall pick in the playoffs, gets the game that's closest to them. Clemson's played in the Orange Bowl before in the playoffs 3 years ago now, when they played Oklahoma. So Clemson will take the orange, and Georgia will be left again going a little bit further west than they would have liked. But still, Dallas is a lot closer than Pasadena, so I think many fans again will make that trip, from Athens and from Georgia all the way over to Texas, and then Wisconsin. They travel well.
Who wouldn't want to go to Jerry's World?
Well, and I'll say this, Wisconsin's no stranger to it. They were, they played West Virginia a couple of years ago in the Cotton Bowl. So, Wisconsin will travel well. They'll bring their fans, and it'll be a good game down in Dallas. And so that's what I got in the playoffs. I got Clemson, Alabama, part 4, and then I got Wisconsin and Georgia meeting again in another bowl game. At least it's not the Outback Bowl this time, but Wisconsin and Georgia meeting down in Dallas. And then I got Georgia playing Clemson. 2 East Coast teams having to travel West Coast to go to the Bay Area to meet in the national championship game.
Yeah, that's Georgia and Clemson. That would be a rematch of 2014 when Deshaun Watson was just a freshman at Clemson.
Yeah, we were at that game with Don, and the one thing I'll never forget is Clemson. It was tied 14-14, and they just put Deshaun Watson there just kind of like to see what he could do. And this man stood in the pocket, stepped up as a true freshman, threw a rocket about 40 yards down, or maybe it was about 30 yards downfield in triple coverage. And I forget who the receiver was. It was probably Deion Kane at the time. And this guy just rifled it into the absolute smallest window between four guys I'd ever seen, three of them being defenders, and it was a touchdown, like right in the middle. I mean, it was insane. Right. And I remember we were standing there. I just looked at you and I was like, my God, that kid's going to be good one day. We never knew that, it'd be, one of the greatest, quarterbacks in the past 10 years in college football. But, here we are. So.
Right. How time flies. Let me just ask you about some current up-to-date news.
Yeah, sure.
Right now, it's looking like that Georgia going into their first game that they're going to be on that quarterback carousel. Good thing, bad thing, or did you see this coming?
A little yes and a little no. Jake Fromm's always been the guy. So, and, ever since Easton went down, it's been Jake Fromm's team or Jake Fromm's offense. And, Justin Fields, I honestly think, hand to God that, Jake Fromm will start every game. That's my belief, is that he'll start every game. But putting Fields in there, I guess, he's grown a lot in terms of not just maturity, but, just, I guess, learning the playbook. So, it just shows that, Chaney and Kirby trust what Fields brings to the table. And, if they want to throw him in there, do some things, again, it's their decision. In my opinion, I wouldn't, necessarily throw him in there a whole lot, and I don't think they will. But, if they do, it's one of those things, okay, cool, let's test it out, let's see what happens, but just don't, it's one of those, you just don't want to get them hurt. But at the same time, you got to get them experience. So you got to find that balance. You got to find, we want to give them experience, but at the same time, as coaches, they're probably saying we don't want to sacrifice them to the wolves and baptize them by fire into an SEC defense, but we want to work him into something that he feels comfortable, let him grow into the system, and, see what he can do. So if Georgia can find that balance, by all means, let him do it. But at the same time, Georgia fans shouldn't be surprised that Jake Fromm starts every game. Now, if Fields gets in there and has success,
right.
You may have fans say, "Oh, Fields needs to start." Fields needs to start. Yeah, all right. Let's, Georgia fans don't need to necessarily throw out the whole system because the guy has a good game, or because the guy comes off the bench and plays pretty well, and has a couple good plays. Don't throw out everything that's gotten Georgia to where they are right now. Georgia would not have played in the national championship had Jake Fromm not been the quarterback. I don't know. I'm not truly certain Jacob Eason could have done all that last year, because Jacob Eason, smart guy, but at times you could even tell he almost overthought some things. Jake Fromm went out there and was kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to sling it around, see what happens, and it worked for him. He didn't do a whole lot of thinking as much. He just stuck with what he knew best. And what he knew best was just trust the coaches. I'm not saying Eason didn't trust the coaches, but I'm just saying that at the same time, Eason kind of overthought a little stuff. He reminded me a lot of Matt Stafford. Eason had some overthrows, kind of like trying to do too much at sometimes and trying to put it too perfect. Just go out there and sling it. Fromm just went out there and slung it around a lot and did really good with it. Fields, on the other hand, Fields is a totally different quarterback, totally different style, totally different methodology. But at the same time, the coaches have to have not, and I don't want to say kid gloves because that's the wrong terminology, but they have to, kind of mold him with care. Because, again, you don't want to throw him out there to the wolves and sacrifice this poor kid, and he gets all banged up and everything. And it's, we just wanted to run the wild dog with him once. We didn't know he was going to get leveled by that middle linebacker. They're not going to do that. So I think they're going to work Fields in what he's comfortable with, a lot like what the offense did with Jake Fromm last year and what Jim Chaney had to do. Work with what he's comfortable with, slowly but surely give him other little things to work on, give him other little things to build on in the offense. So, in all honesty, don't be surprised if Jake Fromm's the starting quarterback every single game next year, barring an injury. But also don't be surprised if Justin Fields does see the field. And also, I'll also say this. If he doesn't see the field, when it's not like a 40-0 blowout, that's still okay. If Justin Fields doesn't get in the game when it's, oh, well, it's, 3rd and 1, let's run the wild dog with him. We're up by 7 against Florida. Georgia fans would say, let's run Justin Fields. They wouldn't expect it. No, when he goes in the game, they're probably going to expect it. You got to be careful about timing with it. So if he doesn't get in, it's like, well, Justin Fields isn't getting enough experience. We could have put him in at Florida. We could have put him in against, South Carolina. Could have put him in against UMass or whatever. Don't overthink that as fans. Fans need to realize that, you know what? Kirby and his guys got Georgia fans to a Rose Bowl and a national championship game last year. Trust the process and trust it.
Right. Let me ask you about another couple of quarterbacks, and then we'll talk about high school football to end out this conversation. But it's looking like, and we're sticking in the SEC East here, it's looking like Florida is going to stick with Felipe Franks for now with their quarterback situation. And Tennessee announced via Instagram, I saw that it's interesting how Instagram is turning into a reliable news source. But that's where we are in 2018. But it looks like they're going to go with Jared Garantano. Yeah. Jared Garantano. Yeah, I might have butchered that. I'm sorry, but it looks like they're going to go with Jared up in Tennessee.
I mean, he came in last year and did a pretty good job, and so I don't see why they wouldn't rely on him going into a second year. Garantano, I mean, he had his.
Yeah, I see the same thing too.
And Tennessee fans lost their minds when they were, in a good way, said, "Oh my gosh, Jared Garantano, he's going to bring us the savior," and then he actually did almost worse than their starting quarterback did at times. But at the same time, it's kind of like, Butch Jones. He kind of knew if Butch Jones didn't know he was going to get fired at Tennessee by the end of the season, he's an absolute idiot. And I think he kind of saw it coming, so he's like, "Let's just get this guy experience." The other quarterback, his name escapes me right now, wasn't doing anything at all. And so when Garantano went in there, Garantano's got some skills. I mean, he can run a little bit shorter, but he can run. He can move in the pocket really well. I mean, he can throw on the run really well. So Tennessee has a talented quarterback. He just got destroyed last year in Butch Jones' system. So to see him in Jeremy Pruitt's system, it'll be very interesting. Don't think that Garantano is going to come out and be the SEC leading quarterback in everything. I mean, he is going to struggle because his weaknesses were really exposed last year, like on a grand scale.
Right.
But then again, a lot of that necessarily wasn't just him. That was a lot of Butch Jones's offense, play calling. So you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. Garantano did play really bad in a lot of situations last year, but he also had some really good moments too. So you got, again, take it with a grain of salt. I think Garantano will be better as time goes on at Tennessee. But Tennessee has probably the hardest gauntlet schedule in the SEC. I mean, they play, like, in a row. They play, like, Florida, Georgia, Bama, Auburn, like, all in a row. South Carolina's thrown in there. So, Tennessee literally plays the top 5 teams in the SEC all back-to-back. So Garantano's going to, if he wasn't baptized by fire last year, he's going to get, losing my train of thought or lose my words here. He's going to get absolutely immersed in the flames if he's not careful. Now, Jeremy Pruitt, we'll see how great of a coach he is because he hasn't been tested yet, obviously, as a head coach. But I would expect Garantano to look better going into his second year than he did his first year. These guys aren't stupid. This kid, he's a smart kid. He kind of got better as the season went on last year, so I think he'll get better this year in terms of looking at back from last year to this year. He'll look better this year. And Felipe Franks, he hasn't had the best offseason. Reports out of Florida saying that he's still kind of struggling with it. Now, I get it. Yeah, they also, like Tennessee, got a new head coach. Dan Mullen's bringing in a different system than Jim McElwain had. Felipe Franks has talent, but I'll tell you this. There were some times last year when he got absolutely exposed, and it was kind of like you were kind of left thinking, this kid was a 5-star quarterback at a high school? Kind of scratching your head like,
right.
Like, this was who Florida really wanted for their, that people were arguing saying he could be the next Tebow? Like, people were really saying it. He has, he's about as tall as Tim Tebow was or is, not as heavy, obviously. Tebow was, more muscle, bigger build. But Felipe Franks can run, not as fast as Tebow, but people are kind of, comparing him, saying he could be the next one. He ain't even close to the next one. He ain't even close to the next Tebow. He ain't even close to the next Tebow. Not even by a nautical mile close. So Felipe Franks is, if Florida people sometimes can get delusional, like any college fan base can get, Georgia fans can get very delusional. Florida fans can get very delusional. But when Florida fans are saying that their own quarterback is struggling, and reports out of the Gainesville Sun and the Orlando Sentinel are saying, yeah, Felipe Franks is struggling, you know that it's probably worse than what they're really saying. Because if I've learned anything in reading news articles out of Florida and out of the South in the past 10 to 12 years, it takes a lot for Florida newspapers to say anything negative about the Florida Gator football program. And when they said stuff negative about Felipe Franks, that was a red flag to me, as this dude is struggle city right now. I mean, this dude is living the struggle bus, apparently. Struggle city population, Felipe Franks, that bad. So he's still, in my opinion, though, he's still an SEC quarterback. Like, he still, did some good things last year. He had that Hail Mary against Tennessee, but then again, that was the dumpster fire. That was, the 2017 Tennessee Volunteers. But other than that, Felipe really didn't do anything. He got destroyed by Georgia. He got absolutely murdered by Missouri, in back-to-back weeks. And, Florida was just struggle city all of October, all of November, lost to Florida State. So if anything, Florida this year is going to have to rely on their running game. They're going to have to rely on their running backs. They have a decent stable of running backs like they've usually always had. But Felipe Franks, they're going to have to really be smart with how they use him and be smart with their play calling. Yeah, Dan Mullen gets some athletes at Florida, but Dan Mullen does not inherit, something of an Alabama caliber. Don't expect Florida to be contending for the East right off the bat. Yeah, the Georgia game will be close. It won't be 42-7 again, but at the same time, don't be surprised if it's 35-17, something like that. So Felipe Franks,
right.
I saw him last year. I was like, dang, this kid can only get better. Apparently he hasn't. From what I've heard he's plateaued. And if you're a Florida fan, you got to be a little bit worried going into the season if that's who you think that's going to be your quarterback for your team. Right.
Yeah, I don't think Florida's had the best luck with their offensive line. Not trying to say what Felipe Franks did last year is a result of offensive line play, but still, he hadn't really had the best, because he had like 5 sacks in the Georgia game. That's when you have 5. Yeah, maybe 2 of them were on you, but then after that, it's like that's on your offensive line.
Florida's defense really underestimated Georgia's offense last year, in my opinion. I mean, their players were saying before the game, Georgia's not that good. They've won. Yeah, they're undefeated, but Jake Fromm really doesn't throw that well, and their defensive line was probably like, their offensive line was probably like, a defensive line ain't anything. And Georgia just showed up to play. Georgia just outmanned them, out-hustled, out-efforted, out-everything Florida last year. And I think their defense really, really underestimated Georgia's speed and talent and just overall, sheer willpower. So Florida just got outmanned all over the place last year. And if anything, they got to go into the season knowing we cannot let that happen again. That Gator offense and that Gator defense have to know that they got to stand up for something a little bit better than what they did last year. So, yeah, Florida, Dan Mullen inherits talent. Florida does have a good coach now, a seasoned coach, but it's not going to be all roses and sunshine this year. I mean, Florida will be better than last year, in my opinion, but it's not going to be some astronomical leap from not going to a bowl to all of a sudden, we're in the SEC championship. It's not going to be that easy. It's not. I've seen grumblings on the Twitter sphere, Florida fans saying, I could see us winning 11 games or winning 12 games. And I just think, my gracious, what is in the water down in that state? What is going on? Because I'm like, okay, yeah, you have a winning season. I can see that. But my God, going almost undefeated? I'm like, That's going to be
Well,
as cold as
it's like
Florida.
Spurrier brought this arrogance to Florida, and it's still there. That's exactly what it is.
These are the sons and daughters of the fans that were in the stands when Spurrier was there. So I don't know what it is. Maybe Urban Meyer was losing the grandeur for his tenure there, but all I'm saying is, if you're planning, if you're making hotel reservations as a Florida fan in Dallas or Miami for the playoffs, you might want to get your head checked by a doctor. So.
Right, maybe next year.
Maybe next year, and then even then you still have to go through a monster team in Georgia and a very, very good team in South Carolina in 2019. But that's looking too far ahead. So,
and Tennessee might be extra level by then.
Tennessee, you never know, could be very competitive by then. Jeremy Pruitt's got people believing, but again, like I've always said, SEC fans are the biggest, dreamers in my opinion. The most unrealistic fans in all of college football at times. And, even as a Georgia fan, Georgia fans included, definitely. I mean, I'm not trying to say Georgia fans aren't delusional. No, Georgia fans, of delusional fans, they're almost the kings of that. But, Florida and Tennessee, they're not far behind, I'll say that.
Appreciate you being on the show, David. Where can we reach you at on social media? Obviously, you write for Fans Favorite Fan, but if people that listen to the show want to talk to you on social, where can they reach you at?
Twitter and Instagram are the two best places. Coach D Berger for both of them, Berger. But Twitter and Instagram, Coach D Berger. That's right.
Now I'm going to try to make this part short. I appreciate you guys if you've listened to the full hour. I know we went over an hour today. I just know we did. If we have to end this, because if we keep on going on and on, someone's going to have to pay for the next hour. I'll just put it that way. Just want to give a special thanks to Don Montgomery Green, David Berger, and Steve Choi. Steve has really been really friendly to the ATL Fan Podcast, and we record out of Spaces Midtown, which isn't like a recording studio at all, but it's actually a co-working space, and Steve has been very accommodating from day one. I have Steve on my podcast during like the introduction phase of my show, and so you guys might recognize Steve. He was definitely in the commercial that we had today about Spaces Midtown. So I just want to give a special thanks to him. He's been dealing with some cat issues recently. So so if you're a Christian, pray for him, or pray to your God about Steve's cat issues. I know he definitely would appreciate that, and definitely appreciate what he does for Fans Favorite Fan and the ATL Fan Podcast. He is one of our biggest supporters, one of our biggest fans, and we just want to say thank you here at Fans Favorite Fan to Steve Choi for all that you've done for Fans Favorite Fan and the ATL Podcast. And most importantly, guys, because the most important thing in the ATL Fan Podcast is the word fan, and we cater to the fans of Atlanta, the Dogs fans, Atlanta United, Georgia Tech, Falcons, Hawks, Braves. This podcast is catered to you guys, so we definitely want your feedback on how we're doing, what you like about the show, and how you think maybe we could make it more interactive, because we're trying to throw some ideas out there how we can make this show more interactive, more fan friendly for you guys, because like I said, fan is the most important thing in the title for this podcast. So if you see this podcast on social media, because we promote it through Fans Favorite Fans social media, be sure to hit that like button, because we definitely would appreciate that. Also, too, like I said, put whatever you want to say in the comment section, how you're feeling about a certain thing. Do you think David's wrong, right, indifferent about what he talked about, or same with Don, because we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your point of view on these things that are happening, are going to happen pretty much. We're only 1 week away. I can't believe it. I can't believe Football Friday is actually going to come true, and we're actually going to talk about football, live football on Football Friday. It's definitely an exciting time here. This part of the year is always exciting. Next week is going to be like, next Friday is actually going to be like Christmas Eve for me. And I know a lot of people who actually feel that same sentiment when you started like in NFL or college. You knew that it's like either that Friday before Labor Day or that Saturday in the second week in September is your Christmas Eve. Just admit it, guys. We all love football. So, but glad that you could check this out. Glad that you could listen to the full hour. If you're listening right now, definitely appreciate that, and thank you guys for being so supportive of Fan's Favorite Fan and the ATL podcast. Much love. I hope that you have a great weekend. Stay safe, and I hope it's fun for you. This is the ATL Fan Podcast. Episode 78 is out.